The vast, inky canvas of the Montana night pressed against the windows of the remote cabin, an endless expanse of silence broken only by the crackle of Kaylin Reed's antique desk lamp and the rustle of her textbook pages. 17 years old, with an athlete's lean strength and a scholar's focused intensity, Kaylin was deep into her studies, preparing for a future that felt a million miles away from the wilderness surrounding her. At her feet, Zephyr, her formidable Wolfdog hybrid, was curled in a loose, powerful knot, his breath a soft rhythm in the quiet room, a silent guardian in repose. Then a sudden, sharp click. It wasn't the sound of the old house settling, nor an animal outside. It was deliberate, metallic, and unnervingly close. Kaylin's head snapped up, her hand instinctively reaching for the old rotary phone on her desk. The dial tone was gone, just a dead, deafening silence. Her heart hitched. Before she could process the implications, a second, more ominous thunk echoed from somewhere downstairs. The desk lamp flickered, then died, plunging the room into absolute, disorienting darkness. Her laptop screen, a small island of light a moment ago, went black with a soft sigh. Outside, in the biting cold, Logan Thorne wiped the residue of severed copper from his wire cutters. A grim satisfaction settled on his face. Power's out, phone lines down. He spoke into a discreet earpiece, his voice a low rumble. Confirm the address one more time, Reese. This is the Reed cabin, right? Biologist, deceased. And the old man, Silas, he's definitely in Denver. The confirmation came back, crisp and affirmative. Perfect work, Logan muttered, more to himself than to his unseen companion. Quiet, quick, profitable. He glanced back at the dark silhouette of the cabin, oblivious to the pair of molten gold eyes watching him from the deep shadows of the surrounding pines. Eyes that held a primal, predatory patience. Back inside, Kaylin stood frozen, every nerve stretched taut. The silence had morphed into something oppressive, a palpable threat. Then, unmistakably, the splintering of wood from the kitchen below. A sharp, violent sound. Window frame, kitchen. Definitely intentional, she whispered, her own voice barely audible in the sudden void. Panic for a fleeting moment threatened to engulf her, but years of living off-grid, years of her parents' intense survival training kicked in. Her mind snapped into a cold, tactical assessment. Beside her, Zephyr's head lifted, ears rotating like finely tuned antennae. The loose coil of his body tensed, every muscle bunching. A low, guttural rumble started deep in his chest, a sound like distant thunder. Not yet a growl, but a clear declaration of his sensing the profound intrusion. Kaylin knelt, pressing her hand onto his powerful neck, feeling the coiled alertness in his sinews. Quiet, she murmured, her voice a desperate plea, a desperate command. Then came the voices, muffled but clear, drifting up from downstairs. Exactly like he said. Big place, isolated, old man's in the hospital, girl's alone. The words landed like a physical blow, stripping away any last vestige of hope that this was a random break-in. Where's the safe, Logan? Reese's voice was a low rasp. We'll find it, Logan replied, his tone dismissive, confident. These researcher types always have money stashed somewhere. We just need to be thorough. Kaylin's blood ran cold. They knew. They knew about her grandpa Silas in Denver, about her parents' legacy. This wasn't some opportunistic thief. This was calculated, targeted. Someone had given them information, she thought, a chilling realization solidifying in the darkness. Someone had betrayed her, or her family. Heavy footsteps began to ascend the stairs, slow and deliberate, each creak of the old wood an amplified echo of dread. Flashlights swept across the walls of the upstairs landing, briefly illuminating the framed wildlife photographs her parents had taken. A fleeting, haunting reminder of a life she fiercely protected. Her gaze fell on Zephyr. The immediate, searing thought was of his danger. If they found him, a creature of his historian and wild beauty, they would see him as a threat, or worse, a valuable prize. He would never allow them to hurt her, and that loyalty would be his undoing. She felt a fierce, protective instinct bloom in her chest, overriding her own fear. Let's check upstairs. If there's a safe, it'll be in a bedroom or office. Logan's voice drifted up, closer now, a chillingly calm declaration of their imminent arrival. Zephyr, sensing the proximity, moved with a silent, fluid grace to block the bedroom door. His hackles rose, a bristling ridge of fur along his spine, transforming him into a creature of pure, ancient defense. He stood as a silent, formidable guardian, ready to unleash a primal fury. Kaylin looked at him, then at the door, her mind racing. Hiding was no longer an option. She had to make a decision, a harrowing choice to face them, to protect Zephyr, to protect whatever it was they were truly after. The bedroom door wasn't just opened, it was violently slammed inward, rattling the old frame. Logan Thorne, a lean, watchful shadow, and Reese, a bulkier, more agitated figure, filled the doorway, their flashlights cutting harsh, swinging arcs through the inky blackness. The beams swept across Kaylin's bed, her desk, then snagged on the figure standing perfectly still by the wall, a dark, imposing monument. The light illuminated Zephyr. His sleek black coat absorbed the raw beam, his powerful form radiating an almost predatory calm. Both men froze mid-step, the air sucked out of the room. This was not in their intel. "Jesus Christ," Reese whispered, his voice thin, his hand instinctively moving to the weapon holstered at his waist. "Logan, that's a goddamn wolf." Fear, raw and undeniable, flickered in his eyes. Logan, however, was different. His gaze narrowed, studying Zephyr with a chilling intensity. He raised a hand, stopping Reese. "Easy, Reese. Nobody moves until we figure out what we're dealing with here." His voice was low, measured, betraying only a flicker of surprise, quickly replaced by calculating curiosity. Kaylin took a breath, the cold knot of fear in her stomach, a constant companion. But she pushed it down. She stepped out from behind Zephyr into the harsh glare of the flashlights, her chin raised, feigning a confidence she didn't fully possess. "You're in my house," she stated, her voice surprisingly steady, echoing the authority of her parents. "You need to leave now." Reese let out a short, derisive laugh. "Oh, we will, sweetheart. Right after you show us where Mommy and Daddy kept their money. But first," he added, his voice hardening, "you're going to put that monster on a leash." "He's not a monster," Kaylin interjected, moving a single, deliberate step closer to Zephyr, placing her hand gently on his neck. The fur was warm, vibrantly alive beneath her palm. "And he doesn't need a leash. He stays with me because he chooses to." She met Reese's gaze with a fierce defiance. Logan's expression shifted, a flicker of something new in his eyes. Not fear, but a tactical interest. "Interesting dynamic you two have," he mused, his voice smooth as riverstones, yet sharp as glass. He wasn't looking at Zephyr as just a dangerous animal, but as a lever. "I think our young friend here is going to be very cooperative." "Like hell I am," Kaylin retorted, the defiance burning brighter. She understood his implication instantly. Her own safety was a given, perhaps, but Zephyr's life was the unspoken threat. She was trapped, holding the delicate balance of Zephyr's controlled behavior against their predatory intent. Zephyr, attuned to her every subtle shift, every tremor of her fear, sensed the escalating tension. A low rumble, deeper and more resonant than before, began to vibrate in his chest, a sound that seemed to shake the very floorboards. His piercing ice-blue eyes, unwavering, were locked onto Logan. Logan ignored Zephyr's warning, his gaze, colder now, fixed on Kaylin. "Here's how this is going to work. You're going to guide us through this house. You're going to show us exactly where your parents kept their assets. And Zephyr," he said, flicking his gaze towards the Wolfdog, "is going to stay calm. Any sudden moves, any aggression, and Reese here," he gestured subtly, "will put him down." Understood? The threat was a physical blow. Kaylin felt the air leave her lungs. Her mind scrambled, desperate. She had to buy time, to protect Zephyr. "There's no safe," she lied, her voice tight. "My parents were researchers, not business people. We don't have that kind of money." Reese scoffed, anger rising in his voice. "Our information says otherwise, sweetheart. Big insurance payout after their accident, significant research grants, family money tied up in investments. Don't play dumb." The depth of their knowledge was chilling. Not just her family's general situation, but specific details. The accident, the grants, her grandfather's absence. Someone, Kaylin realized with a sickening lurch, had fed these men a meticulously detailed blueprint of her life, her vulnerabilities. This wasn't just a robbery, it was an operation. She looked at Logan, then at Zephyr, who remained a silent, quivering force beside her. Her choice was clear. "All right," she said, the word bitter on her tongue. "I'll cooperate, but Zephyr stays with me. If you leave him alone, locked in a room, you'll find the house torn apart when you return. He won't allow it. It's safer for everyone if he's with me, under my control." It was a gamble, leveraging Zephyr's destructive potential against their need for a quick, quiet exit. The tense procession began, a silent, predatory dance through the darkened cabin. Kaylin walked ahead, her movements stiff with forced calm, every sense hyper-alert. Beside her, Zephyr padded like liquid darkness, a silent, living shadow. His head moved constantly, scanning, processing, his keen senses already mapping escape routes, identifying threats in the pervasive gloom. Logan followed, his flashlight beam a harsh, swinging eye, Reese trailing behind, visibly agitated. They started in the living room, a space usually filled with the warmth of old books and quiet conversations. Now it felt violated. Reese, impatient and clumsy, kicked at a stack of Kaylin's parents' wildlife journals. "Nothing here," he grumbled, his voice echoing in the sudden silence. "Just a bunch of dusty papers." Logan, however, seemed to show a creeping doubt. The cabin was rustic, functional, clearly a home, but not opulent. It didn't quite match the informant's promise of a hidden fortune. Next, they moved to her parents' bedroom, then to Grandpa Silas's study, sacred spaces now being defiled. Logan and Reese rifled through drawers, tossed aside decades of research notes, disrupting the order Kaylin had so carefully preserved. A hot, angry flush rose in Kaylin's cheeks. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about the desecration of her family's legacy. Reese's frustration finally boiled over. With a sudden, explosive movement, he grabbed Kaylin's arm, his grip bruising. "Stop wasting our time," he snarled, his breath hot and fetid in her face. "Show us the real hiding place. Now." The instant his fingers closed around her arm, Zephyr's low rumble erupted into a thunderous snarl, a sound that vibrated through the floorboards, raw and terrifying. Reese froze, his eyes wide with primal fear, his hand releasing Kaylin as if burned. Zephyr was a coil of barely restrained fury, his hackles bristling, teeth bared, a vision of pure, untamed predator. Logan, seeing the raw, protective power, stepped between them, his hand raising to calm Reese. Logan's gaze, however, lingered on Kaylin, a flicker of something new in his eyes. He saw the steel beneath her teenage exterior, the quiet defiance that belied her age. He shifted his approach, his voice taking on a deceptively calm tone. "Your parents," he began, "what exactly did they do? I mean, beyond the wildlife photography?" Kaylin, her heart still thrumming from Zephyr's outburst, answered cautiously. "They were biologists. They worked on apex predator reintegration, research, grant funding, nothing that would lead to stashing cash in a safe." She downplayed any hint of significant wealth, hoping to steer them away from their quest. Logan, unimpressed by the lack of readily available cash, mused, his eyes sweeping over Zephyr, then back to Kaylin. "I imagine there are people who would pay handsomely for an animal like that. Collectors, research facilities. There's a market for everything, even unique specimens." Kaylin's stomach clenched, a cold, sickening dread washing over her. This new threat was worse than any robbery. Zephyr, captured, caged, experimented on, sold to some exotic animal collector. "He wouldn't survive captivity," she stated firmly, her voice strained. "He's not a pet, he's wild. He'd die." Logan merely shrugged, a casual cruelty in the gesture that sickened Kaylin. With the right kind of training, anything is possible, or the right kind of confinement. The unspoken implication of the black market, of ruthless exploitation, hung heavy in the air. A desperate thought sparked in Kaylin's mind. "Look," she said, trying to inject a note of calm into her voice. "You've searched the house. There's no safe, no millions. You leave now, no police, no harm done. You can still get away clean." Reese looked at Logan, a flicker of hope in his eyes, but Logan shook his head, his jaw tight. "We're not leaving empty-handed. Our contact was very specific about the value here. Kaylin knew she had to give them something. Something significant, but not everything. Something that would satisfy their immediate greed and, hopefully, avert the terrifying possibility of Zephyr being taken. "All right," she said, her voice barely a whisper, a heavy sense of defeat settling over her. "There's something, but it's not what you think, and it's all I have." She was agreeing to show them a true hidden compartment, one that held not just her family's emergency cash, but also documents that formed the core of her entire security net. She prayed it would be enough. She led them back to Dr. Elias Reed's study, a room now in disarray. Logan, his flashlight beam focused, followed her instructions precisely. His fingers traced a specific edge on an old leather-bound bookshelf, pressing a piece of trim that was almost invisible against the dark wood. With a soft click and a faint groan of old hinges, a hidden panel swung open, revealing a dark recess behind the books. The hidden compartment in Dr. Reed's study yielded its secrets. Logan, with a cold, efficient grace, pulled out bundles of cash, a surprisingly substantial amount for a research biologist, along with a small, intricately carved wooden box. Reese let out a triumphant grunt, a greedy grin spreading across his face. Logan, however, paused, his flashlight beam catching on a document. His initial satisfaction faded, replaced by a flicker of confusion as he scanned the paper. A life insurance policy for $200,000, payable to a trust. "What is this?" he demanded, his gaze snapping to Kaylin. "A trust?" Kaylin swallowed hard, knowing she had to reveal more of her vulnerabilities. "It's my parents' life insurance," she explained reluctantly, her voice tight. "For me, inaccessible until I'm 21, controlled by my grandpa Silas." The revelation only deepened Logan's predatory interest. He calmly pocketed the cash, then turned his attention to the small wooden box. He snapped it open, revealing a collection of delicate antique jewelry, rings, necklaces, a watch. "And these?" he asked, his voice deceptively mild, but his eyes gleaming with a new avarice. "Antique jewelry, I assume." "They're family heirlooms," Kaylin protested, a fresh wave of despair washing over her. These weren't just objects. They were fragments of her past, tangible connections to generations. Logan merely gave a cold, dismissive shrug. "Right now, I can do whatever I want with them." He snapped the box shut, the sound of final metallic punctuation to her loss. Reese, emboldened by Logan's assertion of power, puffed out his chest. His gaze drifted to Zephyr, who stood silently, a coiled spring of controlled power. "Maybe we should deal with it," Reese sneered, "before it decides to get aggressive." He made a move toward his holstered weapon. Logan held up a hand, stopping Reese again. His eyes, however, never left Zephyr. "No," he said, a disturbing new insight hardening his voice. "She's got something better than a trust fund or a few trinkets. I think your parents didn't just study wolves, they raised one." Logan's gaze drifted from Zephyr to Kaylin, a chilling understanding dawning in his eyes. "This isn't an animal, Reese," Logan continued, his voice low, resonating with a new dangerous conviction. "This is a weapon, a highly intelligent, perfectly trained weapon most people can't even imagine." He gestured around the study. "Forget the key, pack those valuable bird prints, and get some restraints. We're taking the Wolfdog." Kaylin felt a cold dread clamp around her heart. It was happening. Logan was going to take Zephyr. Her mind raced, desperate for a way out. Logan, sensing her terror, leaned in, his voice dropping to a cruel whisper. "Consider this a life lesson, kid. The world takes what it wants, just like it took your parents in that plane crash. Nothing you can do about it." The words, a casual brutality comparing her profound loss to their petty theft, struck a raw nerve. Kaylin's carefully constructed composure shattered. A wave of pure, visceral rage surged through her. Zephyr, responding instantly to her internal turmoil, felt the shift. His low rumble deepened, resonating with an unspoken threat, a predatory growl now unmistakable. For the first time, a flicker of genuine fear crossed Logan's face. Then from far off, a new sound cut through the oppressive silence, the distant thrum of a vehicle engine. It echoed through the vast, quiet mountains, growing steadily louder. An approaching vehicle. Logan's head snapped up, His eyes narrowed, blazing with a murderous intent Kalen hadn't seen before. He grabbed her, yanking her close, his gun pressing hard against her temple. "Who is that?" he hissed, his voice lethal. "Who is out here in the middle of the night?" The truck slowed, then creaked to a stop just outside the cabin. A familiar voice, old and gruff, but filled with genuine concern, cut through the night. "Kalen, you there, sweetheart? Saw the power was out, thought I'd check on you." It was old man Jedediah, their nearest neighbor, a true mountain fixture. In that split second of Logan's distraction, his gun wavering for a fraction of an inch, Kalen moved. "Zephyr," she yelled, a single sharp command. The Wolfdog, with an explosion of power, launched himself forward. Not at Logan, the primary threat, but at Reese, the closer, less guarded target. Zephyr's massive body slammed into Reese with bone-crushing force, sending him sprawling against a bookshelf. Books cascaded around him as he let out a choked, terrified scream, his weapon clattering uselessly across the floor. Kalen broke free of Logan's grip, stumbling backward. "Zephyr, stop!" she yelled, her voice raw. The Wolfdog immediately disengaged, leaving Reese a crumpled, injured heap amidst the scattered books, whimpering in pain. Logan, reeling from the sudden, perfectly calculated chaos, stared at the scene, momentarily stunned, his plan thrown into disarray. The sheer explosive chaos of Zephyr's attack had barely subsided when the creak of the front door announced another arrival. Kalen spun, heart pounding, expecting another threat, but relief washed over her in a dizzying wave. Standing framed in the study doorway was old man Jedediah, his weathered face grim, an ancient double-barrel shotgun held with a steady, practiced ease of a man who knew its deadly purpose. "Well, I'll be damned," Jedediah drawled, surveying the scene. Reese whimpering amid scattered books, Logan clutching his bleeding wrist, Zephyr a silent, watchful sentinel, and Kalen, trembling but upright. His eyes, surprisingly sharp for his age, found Kalen. "You all right, sweetheart?" "Walt, how did you—" Kalen stammered, still processing the swift turn of events. Jedediah offered a faint, humorless smile. 20 years in the Marines doesn't just disappear. Heard the generator cut, saw the lights out, figured I'd mosey on over. Good thing I did." His gaze hardened, fixing on Logan. Logan, gasping in pain, clutched his mangled wrist, his voice raspy with fury. "That thing is a wolf. She's been lying to everyone." Jedediah dismissed Logan with a flick of his shotgun. "Son, I've known about Zephyr since Kalen found him as a pup. Half the county knows he's a Wolfdog. We also know he's never hurt anyone who didn't deserve hurting." His tone left no room for argument. Kalen moved immediately to Zephyr's side, her hand running over his powerful neck, checking for any injuries. He leaned into her touch, the raw tension slowly leaving his muscles, replaced by a quiet, focused calm. This moment, this connection, was everything, but the relief was fleeting. The looming shadow of officialdom, of the world's inability to understand or accept a creature like Zephyr, quickly returned. Kalen looked at Jedediah, her eyes wide with a fresh fear. "When the sheriff gets here," she whispered, "they're going to want to take Zephyr. They'll have him destroyed." Jedediah's grim nod confirmed her worst fears. He kept his eyes on Logan and Reese, but his voice was low for Kalen's ears only. "I've been doing some digging, Kalen. Silas Kovac. He's been running his mouth down in Denver, telling anyone who'll listen about your family's supposed wealth, the hidden millions your parents supposedly left behind. These boys weren't the only ones interested, not by a long shot." Kalen's stomach dropped. "You mean there could be others?" The realization was terrifying. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was a sustained threat. Jedediah nodded, his face etched with worry. "Even if we get through tonight, you might not be safe here anymore, Kalen." From the floor, Logan, defeated and bitter, interjected. "Billy owes money to some very bad people. They'll keep coming. They don't give up easily." Jedediah squared his shoulders, a glint of steel in his gaze. "Then we make sure they're convinced there's nothing here to find." He looked at Kalen, a silent question in his eyes. The implication was clear. To protect herself and Zephyr, she might have to leave the only home she'd ever known. The faint wail of sirens, growing steadily louder as they snaked up the mountain roads, cut through the tense quiet. It was a sound that brought both the promise of help and the dread of a new battle. "When Sheriff Brody gets here," Jedediah instructed, his voice firm, "you tell him exactly what happened, Kaylin. Don't try to protect anyone. And don't you worry about Zephyr. I've got some influence in this county. We'll make sure they understand." He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "The important thing is that you and Zephyr survive this night, and whatever comes after." The cabin door opened again, revealing Sheriff Brody, his flashlight beam slicing through the dimness. He took in the disarray, the two injured men, Jedediah with his shotgun, and Kaylin with Zephyr, his expression grim. "Well, Kaylin," he said, his voice heavy, "looks like we have quite a situation here." The quiet life she had cherished was over, shattered by the greed of strangers and the dark tendrils of a conspiracy far wider than she could have imagined. What would she do now? And how would she protect Zephyr when the world inevitably came for him? Stay tuned for the next part to see if Kaylin can navigate this perilous new reality, protect Zephyr, and uncover the truth behind her family's secrets. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel for more thrilling stories. 3 months later, the Montana cabin, once a scene of terrifying chaos, radiated a quiet peace. The study where so much had transpired was meticulously restored. A faint patch on the ceiling marked the bullet hole from Reese's misguided shot, a tangible reminder of that night, but now new books filled the shelves, and the air smelled of lemon polish and fresh pine. Kaylin sat at her parents' old desk, a mug of steaming coffee warming her hands. Sheriff Brody, looking less grim than usual, sat opposite her. He delivered the news with a rare smile. "It's official, Kaylin. After all the investigations, all the hearings, Zephyr is officially classified as a therapeutic companion animal. Not a wild predator. He stays." Kaylin's hands trembled, the mug rattling softly against the saucer. She had almost given up hope during the agonizing months of legal battles and bureaucratic red tape. The relentless fight, championed by Old Man Jedediah's local influence and the meticulous psychological evaluation by Dr. Vivian Hayes, had paid off. Hayes's report, detailing Zephyr's exceptional emotional intelligence, his deep bond with Kaylin, and his therapeutic benefit, had been the turning point. Outside, visible through the large window, Zephyr moved freely in his newly expanded enclosure. The gate, however, was often open now, providing a secure space when needed, but never imprisonment. He was a presence, a watchful spirit that moved between house and wild, his loyalty absolute. Sheriff Brody continued with the updates. Logan Thorne pleaded guilty, armed robbery, assault. With that wrist, they added some charges. He's facing 15 to 20 years. Judge also ordered mandatory psychological treatment for combat PTSD. Seems his past caught up to him. Just then, the front door opened, and Grandpa Silas stepped into the study. He was slower, perhaps, but his eyes held a renewed strength. He carried a fresh pot of coffee and a broad smile. "Got some good news, Kaylin," he announced, his voice raspy with relief. "Got a call from Colorado State University. You've been accepted to their veterinary program with a full academic scholarship. They were mighty impressed with your grades, and frankly, your real-world experience that night didn't hurt." Kaylin's eyes widened, a joyous gasp escaping her lips. It was more than she could have dreamed. "And there's more," Silas continued, pouring Kaylin a fresh cup. "The insurance company finally settled the disputed claim, enough to cover any expenses not handled by the scholarship, and to establish the Dr. Elias and Dr. Lena Reed Foundation for Wildlife Conservation. Your parents' legacy, Kaylin, it's going to live on." Kaylin was overwhelmed, tears stinging her eyes. Then Silas added, "The first major donation to the foundation. It came from an unexpected source." He handed Kaylin a sealed envelope. It was a handwritten letter, the script tight and precise. From Logan Thorne. Kaylin read it aloud, her voice trembling slightly. "To Kaylin Reed, that night I saw something in you and in Zephyr that I haven't seen in a long time. You showed me what real strength looks like, not the kind you find in a gun. I hope the money helps you continue your parents' work. Maybe some good can come of all this." Kaylin paused, processing the complex emotions. Redemption. from the man who had terrorized her. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a recognition of a shared humanity, a strange, unexpected twist in a story of violence. As if summoned by her thoughts, Zephyr appeared, padding silently into the room. He rested his massive head on Kaylin's knee, his ice blue eyes scanning the room, then settling on her with unwavering devotion. The warmth of his fur, the steady beat of his heart against her leg, was a grounding presence. Sheriff Brody watched them, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You know, Kaylin," he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it, "I used to think keeping a wolfdog in the wilderness was the most dangerous thing you could do. Now I think letting you two get separated, letting a bond like that be broken, would have been the real tragedy." Kaylin, Zephyr, and Grandpa Silas sat together, the late afternoon sun streaming through the window, painting the study in golden hues. They began to plan. A future where Kaylin Esa would study, research, and advocate, where her parents' legacy lived on through conservation efforts, through understanding, and most profoundly, through the unbreakable bonds of family, both human and wild, forged in the crucible of fear and defiance. A new chapter was beginning, built on resilience, unexpected redemption, and an oath to protect what truly mattered. The wire cutters clicked with deafening finality that night, plunging Kaylin Reed's isolated cabin into a suffocating darkness. Logan Thorne and Reese, armed with what they believed was clean as mountain snow intelligence about a rich, defenseless target, anticipated a perfect work, quiet, quick, profitable heist. They saw only the potential for insurance money and family heirlooms, utterly blind to the true, formidable guardians within. They had no idea that Kaylin, forged by the wilderness and trained by her biologist parents, possessed a strength that defied her youth, nor did they comprehend the primal loyalty of Zephyr, her wolfdog, whose molten gold eyes had watched their every move. What began as a simple robbery quickly unraveled into a complex web of deceit and a desperate fight for survival, exposing not just greedy men, but a wider conspiracy that threatened Kaylin's very existence. Yet, from that terrifying crucible, an unexpected redemption emerged. The community rallied, Zephyr's unique nature was championed, and even the villain found a path to atonement. Kaylin and Zephyr, forever bound by the night that redefined their lives, now carry forward a legacy far more valuable than any hidden fortune, a future dedicated to understanding and protecting the wild, echoing her parents' life work. The silence of the mountain night may have promised an easy score, but it ultimately revealed an unbreakable bond and a spirit that refused to be extinguished.